The fighting skeletons in Jason and the Argonauts is one of those things which you might have grown up loving. I know I certainly did. And I thought what I could do was talk a bit about it and some of the aspects of the myth behind it. I'll start then with the skeletons. And the skeletons, by the way, weren't in the original myth, and I'll come to those in a moment. These were created by the genius Ray Harryhausen, who created much of the animation in Jason and the Argonauts and other films. And in fact, a fighting skeleton had featured in the seventh Voyage of Sinbad, which was a film that predated Jason and the Argonauts, and perhaps this is why he decided to use them in this instance. And they're wonderfully detailed. I actually saw one up close at a Ray Harryhausen exhibition a few years ago, and what I'm drawn to now and hadn't noticed until recently was the designs on the shields. And these don't look really that out of place, particularly that octopus. I've seen that on a couple of Mycenaean vases. So perhaps he was looking at Greek vases and perhaps other shields, images of shields on vases to get ideas for the emblems on some of those shields. Interestingly, there are two myths involved with sewing dragon's teeth, because that's how the scene opens. You've got King Aeetes there, who is the father of Medea, who Jason is running away with and becomes quite famous on her own part. And what happens is he sews the teeth. The teeth then, you've seen it, skeletons grow from them. And Jason and his company have to fight them. In the myth, it's quite different. In the myth, this is actually a test. And often when we have myths, we have testing the hero. That's a fundamental part of being a hero. You have to be tested. And this was the second test that he undertook. It was Jason who actually sewed these. And from the ground, sprouted some fearsome warriors. And Jason had to defeat them. And Medea had actually counselled him and said what a good idea would be. Why don't you throw a stone or a rock in amongst them? And one of them will think the other one hit him, and then they'll start fighting amongst themselves. And that's actually how he defeats them. So in the myth, he defeats them through cunning ruse, which is often a good indication of a sort of hero's progress through a particular narrative. There is a second myth associated with sewing dragon's teeth, and it takes place in a very different location, this time in mainland Greece and at Thebes. And in fact, it's linked to the foundation of Thebes. You can actually see it shown a bit on this vase here, dating to the 4th century BC, and it involves King Cadmus. Cadmus was Phoenician. He travelled to mainland Greece, and receiving an oracle, he founds Thebes. And he does so through, in part, defeating a serpent. That's a myth linked to him. He defeats a serpent at a nearby spring, he's given some teeth, and he sews them. And from those upspring more fearsome warriors. And he does pretty much what Jason does. He throws a rock in amongst them, one thinks the other one's hit the other one, and they all start fighting. And eventually, 5 are left. These 5 warriors who've sprouted from the earth actually help Cadmus found Thebes. And what's interesting there is this is given as a sort of narrative for the ancestry of some of the noble families there. They are able, or rather they try to track their family through to those 5 individuals. For example, one of them is the father of Pentheus, who you might be aware of, who, to be fair, doesn't really have a good run of it in Greek mythology. But I think the most important thing to learn from all of this is if you come across any dragon's teeth, just don't plant them. Put them on the shelf, leave them be.